When we think about cancer, we usually picture one thing, right? A tumor. Something that needs to be attacked, cut out, or destroyed. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if that tumor isn't the disease at all, but just the last, most visible symptom of a much, much deeper problem?
Well, that's exactly the question at the heart of this pretty controversial theory we're going to unpack today. What if the real illness isn't a lump of rogue cells, but a gradual, slow-motion shutdown of the entire body? A kind of physical withdrawal from life itself. So, the whole idea hinges on this concept called biopathy, a term coined by researcher Wilhelm Reich. A biopathy isn't like an infection that attacks you from the outside. No, the idea here is that it's a disease that comes from within, from a fundamental breakdown of the body's most basic, pulsating rhythm of life.
Okay, so here's a simple way to think about it. On one side, you've got stuff that happens to you from the outside. A bacterial infection, a broken bone, you get the idea. But biopathies, in this view, are totally different. Things like cancer, asthma, even chronic high blood pressure are all seen as different symptoms of the exact same internal problem.
So what is this internal problem? Well, this is where it gets really controversial. According to the theory, it all boils down to a chronic blockage of what Reich called the body's core life energy, which he directly linked to sexual energy. The idea is that if this fundamental energy can't flow and release properly, it gets trapped and eventually turns inward, causing either mental illness or physical disease.
Here's how it's supposed to work. A healthy body is always in this natural rhythm, a pulse of expansion and contraction. Think of breathing. But things like chronic anxiety and suppressed emotions are said to lock the body into a permanent state of contraction, like you're constantly bracing for a punch that never comes. The end results? All the body's functions start to literally shrink and wither away. They call this biopathic contraction.
And this isn't just some vague feeling, according to the theory. It claims there are real physical signs you can point to. Breathing gets shallow and restricted. Muscles stay tense all the time. Blood pressure goes up. Emotionally, the person becomes rigid, sort of armored. And maybe most controversially, Reich argued it leads to an inability to fully release that core energy, a state he called orgasmic impotence. All right, so to really understand how this all supposedly works in the real world, let's look at this one really dramatic case study from the source material. It's about a 45-year-old woman with terminal cancer, someone who had apparently been completely written off by conventional medicine. And when I say her situation was dire, I mean it was absolutely grim. The cancer had spread to her bones. Doctors had apparently given her just 2 months to live. Her hemoglobin was down to a life-threatening 35%. Her blood was reportedly full of these degrading cells the theory calls T bacills. She was stuck in bed in constant pain and had this shrunken, gray look to her skin. So, at this hopeless stage, she was treated with something called orgone energy therapy, which was Reich's own controversial method. And what happened next? Well, by any description, it was just miraculous. I mean, the speed of this recovery is just staggering to read about. On the very first day, her skin reportedly flushed red and she started to sweat for the first time in years. Within 3 weeks, her hemoglobin rocketed from 35% up to a normal 85%. The T bacilli, gone. By week 6, she was out of bed, taking care of her kids, and by week 8, get this, her breast tumor was reportedly no longer palpable and x-rays showed her bones were actually healing.
So, the cancer's beaten, right? It sounds like a total victory, the end of the story. But then, right in the middle of this incredible healing, she says this one terrifying thing. I feel like my body is going to break apart.
And this is the absolute core of the mystery here. Physically, she was on the mend. I mean, the tumors were disappearing, her blood was normal. So what on earth could she be so terrified of? What could possibly feel worse than dying from cancer? The answer is, it's just shocking. She became paralyzed. Not from pain, the pain was gone, but from this overwhelming fear of just moving. She went right back to bed, completely unable to move a muscle, locked in terror. Reich had a name for this. He called it orgasmic anxiety. The idea was that her life force, this energy that had been stamped down for decades, was finally surging back. And as it came back, it started to crash against all this chronic muscle tension, this armor she'd built up. The sensation was supposedly so intense, so foreign, that her mind literally interpreted it as a threat to her life. So you have these two totally different interpretations of the same feeling.
She feels, I'm going to break apart. The theory says, no, that's just your emotional armor finally cracking. She feels, I'm dying. And the theory says, you're feeling your own life force return for the first time. Her terror was, in this view, a fear of the very energy that was healing her.
So you have to picture her body as this literal battlefield. On one side, you have this expanding, healing life force trying to break free. On the other, you have a lifetime of muscular and emotional armor designed to keep that exact force locked down. And in the end, the armor won. And this is the critical point of the whole story. She didn't die from cancer. The cancer was gone. She died from this internal war. Okay, so to really hammer this point home, the idea that the tumor is just the final symptom, the source material brings up one last case. And honestly, this one might be even stranger.
You've got this 30-year-old woman, and on paper, doctors are saying she's perfectly healthy. But in person, she was described as just empty, emaciated, no energy, like she had already checked out from life, even though there was no official disease to point to.
But then they did the same kind of blood test on her, and the result was just a bombshell. Her blood profile was a 100% match for someone in the final stages of terminal cancer.
So in this framework, her diagnosis was something called cancerous shrinking biopathy. The point being, her whole body, her entire system, was already in the final shrinking phase of the cancer process. The systemic disease was fully active, even before a single tumor had a chance to form. For proponents of this theory, this was the ultimate smoking gun.
And that's what this all leads to. It leaves us with this really huge and, frankly, pretty unsettling question. Is it possible that the root of some of our most feared illnesses isn't some external invader or a random genetic flaw, but a deep, systemic, and ultimately physical process of withdrawing from life itself? It's a lot to think about.